Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the session recap for Eurodollar on Thursday, the 8th of September 2022. Daily chart. Like I've been saying obviously throughout the week, we had that recent break of structure, but after we had that break of structure, there wasn't really any follow through, was there? Like it pretty much instantly was stopped dead in its tracks, and it had a bit of a choppy pullback to a reasonably insignificant level of supply on the daily chart. Right, didn't quite reach the premium, didn't quite reach major significant levels. It doesn't have to, but that can be some indication that potentially at some point price may actually want to pull back up here to fill those orders to rebalance price to get that next move to the downside. The last 3 consecutive days in a row, we have seen price attempt to break and close below this most recent low and fail to do so. And then yesterday on Wednesday, we had that sort of aggressive full-bodied retrace candle, essentially giving us that morning star formation, showing us that bullish pressure may potentially be coming into the market. Potentially this week, this high is weak, and we may start to see that deeper pullback to more premium levels of supply, or potentially we may have a trend change. Who knows at that point? But that's a bit too much of a prediction. But it's more the case of you can see price trying to push down, and the bulls are starting to step in and push price there to the upside. Pretty similar story on the 4-hour chart. Ignore the annotations as best you can. But we can see, it initially tried to break and close below that low, failed to do so. And then we did obviously get that break and close below the low. But this is what I was saying, although it's technically a bust and I am being 100% mechanical with it, and this does become the new swing high, I'm still very much cautious of the fact that when we came back down, we again failed to break and close below that most recent low. So that's why I'm kind of viewing this as sort of reasonably weak high in a way, right? It's not like a normal bust that we would get where we get a true strong break and close below. I would have ideally liked to have seen this candle here close below that recent low, which we didn't get, and we got another break to the upside, and obviously a big strong amount of momentum breaking up, giving us that change of character there. And ultimately breaking out of the supply chain, which we knew when you get kind of multiple mitigations like this, a series of supply chains, what eventually happens is you build a ton of buy-side liquidity above those highs. Once you kind of break out above the most recent level of supply, there's not a lot of supply left in the market at these levels to absorb price. So very often you can see aggressive moves that then push to the upside because it needs to seek where that next level of supply is going to be, and all of the supply here has already been absorbed because all the orders have been tapped into, right? And that's very often what you can see. So we do obviously have some supply left in these 4-hour wicks, which is what I've got dragged across here and price is reacting from. But this is the type of situation in which I think it's a lot less likely that price is going to come into here and then roll down and continue that move, because we've already had the pullback into this level of supply, right, into the distal, like we tapped into here, and filled up the majority of those orders, which is what caused this move here. So when I kind of have a wick supply like this, especially one where the distal has already been mitigated and already caused the move, I'm not really expecting much from it. It's more just likely maybe to give us a bit of a reaction, a bit of a 4-hour internal pullback. And then on the balance of probabilities, I'd probably expect that we may see this move and potentially even run this 4-hour swing high here, simply based on everything I've just described, right? How we keep failing to break those lows. We've now had that aggressive retrace. We've started to break out of the supply chain, a ton of momentum, so that could be happening. But we don't have confirmation of that just yet. We could roll over. Who knows? We have ECB news in a couple of hours' time. So the ECB is the European Central Bank. They are the central bank who obviously sets the interest rates for, the European Union. Should be more specific, the European, I don't know what the exact terminology is, but the European Monetary Policy Area. So obviously not every country in the European Union has their interest rates tied into the ECB, but you guys know what I'm getting at, right? It's a high impact news announcement where we can often see price sort of range bound and indecisive beforehand, and then obviously price can shoot out either way depending on how that may go. But the key point I'm rounding out that I'm trying to make to you guys is understanding that although we're bearish, you could start to see those early signs of bullish pressure coming in. That it wasn't too surprising when we come to the upside. Coming up into this levels of supply, I'm not expecting a lot because it's simply just a wick. Distal was already mitigated here and caused that move, so just seeing a bit of a pause in price action. And it's not super clear what's going to happen just next just yet. So let's see if the high impact news can sort of give us a bit more solid direction. M15 is a little bit cleaner in terms of its sort of more immediate intentions. Why do I say that? Well, because we've had a clear bullish break of structure to the upside, so we now have this larger swing range to work within. During Asia, we did tap into that 4-hour supply, but again, remember, it's not the most significant of 4-hour levels of supply because it's, again, just that wick, right, where the distal had already been mitigated, so not really expecting too big of a move from here. If we zoom in, our bar replayed it back to just sort of pre-Frankfurt Open, but if we zoom in, we did have a sort of slight sweep of liquidity. We then got the bearish change of character here, which I'll just draw on the M15. Right, signaling at least we're getting an M15 internal pullback from this level of 4-hour supply, and we moved down and we did break this level of demand. However, as we can see, price failed to break and close below. Okay, so remember, a chock just signals the start and end of an internal pullback, but we need the IBOS, as in this significant piece of structure here, we need to see a break and close below this low here to get that bearish IBOS to signal the start and end of the swing pullback. Okay, so chock signals the start and end of the internal pullback. IBOS signals the start and end of the internal pullback. Okay, sorry, the swing pullback. So when price came down and it fell to close below here, that's a sort of a signal that potentially we're not ready to have that deeper swing pullback yet. Because if we had have broken and closed below here, what would that mean? Well, that would mean that this high has done its job because it's caused price to break below that low. Okay, and that would then mean that the internal structure is then bearish. So as price pulls back up here, what is this? This is a strong internal high. So the expectation from an internal structure perspective would be that this high will hold and we'll see price move down and take out this weak low. And that's why you then end up getting that deeper swing pullback, because the internal structure has shifted bearish to facilitate that swing pullback, right? So in this instance, it doesn't break and close below. So on the balance of probabilities, this is likely still weak because it's failed to cause that low. And we can see it's more of a sweep, especially when you see a big wick like that. That's also the nature of how that sweep happens. It leads to a bullish change of character, and then kind of as European volumes start to kick in, we're starting to see that bullish order flow kick in, right? Because you can see here initially we had that supply range here, and then we get price break this to the upside. And we can start to see demand in control, whether you want to draw it from here, right, or the most recent range. Let's keep it a little bit more simple over here, right? And you can start to see what we now expect is this bullish order flow to continue, right? To go on and take the high. If this bullish internal structure is still intact, that would be the expectation, right? We had the bearish ranges here to facilitate that pullback. It failed to cause a boss. We get the bullish chock after the sweep. Order flow starts to shift bullish, so the expectation would be these small bullish ranges would hold until it takes out that high. Now, that's the expectation purely just looking at the internal structure on its own. Does it mean it's high probability? Well, we're coming off 4-hour supply. Yes, it's not the most significant, but it's still there. It's still supply nonetheless. We've had the M15 break of structure. What do we expect after an M15 break of structure? We expect that swing pullback to kick in at any moment. So I didn't have high confidence that this was necessarily going to be the move to go on and break that high in order to look for longs to take that. But I also did have no confidence in wanting to take shorts from within here, which is what I put in my pre-session analysis. I wouldn't be that. I'd be pretty cautious looking at shorting from this high because it's weak. It failed to do its job. So really at this point, what I was had my kind of eye set on was waiting for price to either break this low, right, to actually give us that IBOS. So then that would make this high strong, and then we can look for the shorts from within that strong high to play the pullback, or wait for this weak high to be broken and then look for the shorts from within here to, at a minimum, play the internal pullback into that strong internal low, but with the potential that we may get that bearish IBOS to play that deeper swing pullback down into these more discounted levels. So really, it's kind of like the main forecast that I had at the time. So we drop down to the M1 as Frankfurt Open starts to kick in. And we can see kind of what happens here. Let's bring this nearer to 7. Okay. So at this point, you see when you kind of see volume start to kick in and big intentions compared to recent price action. Not always, but a lot of the times kind of around Frankfurt Open, if you see that, there can be usually a quick trade almost following that momentum. Of course, as well, ideally it wants to be in line with what that higher time frame narrative is. Okay, so again, if we remind ourselves of what the M15 was doing, it failed to break and close below that low. So technically, this is still that weak internal high that we can look to target. Obviously, the M15 is bullish as well, a ton of momentum to the upside, etc., etc. We've had that sweep, we've had that bullish change of character, and now you can start to see that bullish order flow coming intact. So really, kind of, if anything I was looking at, it would have been price coming into this M15 pivot, which, spoiler alert, it doesn't quite come into. But as we know, it doesn't have to always come into the refined level. You can have these slightly, like the range, right? Price can come in, tap into the range, and go. Now, if you look at the M5, this can often very help you as well with these sort of more quick, aggressive continuations. Just kind of following, that order flow. What do we have? We have this M5 zone here, right? Where essentially you can see price moving like this. So if you see that kind of push up straight towards into Frankfurt Open, potentially this can be a level to try and capture like at least towards that high and potentially trying to target higher. So this is kind of just a trade that set up. Is it something I was really looking at? No. It's more something I saw in hindsight, but there's a lot of logic behind it and it makes sense. For some of you guys who are more advanced or just want to look in potentially other ways to get into the market. But essentially, right, that is your M5 low. You'd be looking, you could just set a risk entry on this M5 demand zone itself. That would be even easier, or potentially you want to refine that and get your risk reward as high as possible, considering it's a bit more of an aggressive trade, right? You want to make it worth your while, and you can see here we have this extreme of that M5, the M1 zone within that, which was a sweep zone, and even better, it has perfect inducement with this low sitting just above this level here, and this was just kind of one trade that potentially could have looked at. However, I do believe it was triggered a few minutes before Frankfurt Open, so it depends on how strict you are, with your trade plan. In terms of that, I think entry there would be, what's that? Let's see, 6:56. Yeah, Frankfurt's not for another 4 minutes, and he tagged in, and it rocketed nicely to the upside. So with a trade like this, you want to be pretty damn aggressive with your management. Risk removed at least by the time that high is gone, or if you passed it at 4 hour or whatever. But I definitely wouldn't be pushing it any higher than the most recent M15 internal high. I personally would be out of full profits if I had have caught that move at that point. But it's really kind of just, that's the logic behind that, at least the way I view it. I can see it makes sense. Is it an amazing trade? Maybe not necessarily. It's not really something I'm personally classifying as a mistrade, but it is there. So then price ends up, at least on first attempt anyway, failing to close above the internal high. And as we can see at this point with the next candle, right, that's the type of characteristics that we see for a sweep. So now at this point, this is where I'd be very, very cautious of looking for longs from any of here, because really this low's job is to do what? It's to cause that boss and to cause that high. So you can hypothesize that it's pretty likely this is going to be weak. Now that won't always happen. Sometimes you can still get this. And because obviously the overall structure is still bullish, these can play out. It's just, they're a lot lower probability than what it would be. Obviously if we got that closure, then that would be a strong low, and then I would have high conviction, just purely looking at this price action in terms of the internal structure, that would be a strong low, right, to continue that move. But in this case, it doesn't, so I wouldn't really want to be looking at any longs, especially as we're coming off for our supply, especially because of the sweep. The retrace, we've had the M15 boss, so we're expecting that M15 pullback, right? There's just nothing really that's super high probable here. However, I would be keen to look for the shorts, but as we go down to the M1, right, when we look at the entry, I'm just going to move a lot of this out of the way for a minute. The M1 chock was all the way down here, right? This being the most recent M1 low, right? The fractal low, price breaks it. Where am I going to enter? Nowhere really. This is the type of trade I'm not even really looking at it. This is probably the best level out of all of them because it's the unmitigated extreme, but this is just kind of horrible. It's all sort of corrective and then it just dumps out. Yes, there is a flip here, but there's no sweep, there's no inducement, right? That for me is just kind of one push down and you're trying to enter in sort of the middle of that leg. Like if it maybe had a bit more substance to it, right? Something like that, okay, fine. But this is just, that would not be the type of flip I would personally have confidence setting a limit on. I don't believe price pulls back to anyway. It just continues to dump. So definitely at this point when you've had a far movement away, like with those kind of flips where it's kind of just one straight push, no sweep, no real kind of pullback, no inducement, I want to be tagged in straight away. So i.e. at that moment you get the chock here, potentially if you really liked it, right, you'd set your limit here, and I kind of want to get tagged in straight away, and then when price pushes down, because it's halfway in a leg, and what that means is I can get in, I can remove my risk, because then if price actually has a proper pullback, your like I said, you've removed your risk, right? So it's fine. But in these instances, when it's kind of had that push down, and now you're trying to set a limit just in the middle of this leg on kind of a random POI, like you have a much more minimal stop protection if price has that deep pullback. So they're the types of trades where the POI is kind of, a little bit nondescript. I personally want to get tagged in straight away, and if I don't, and I'd set my limit, and it starts to do this, then I would cancel. That wouldn't be the type of trade I'd be in. But really, in honesty, I wasn't even really looking at this point. It's just sitting in the middle of price action. So I was just not really looking at price action. Then we took out the low, so my alert went off. Wanted to see what happens next, because if we got the break and closure below this low, then what would have happened? Well, then the internal structure would have switched bearish, because we would have got the bearish IBOS. So now we'd have confirmation, right, that we're going to get what? That we're going to get that deeper swing pullback, and we'd expect the internal ranges to hold to facilitate that swing pullback. Why? Well, because this would have become a strong high because it broke the low. So when price pulls back, we expect this high not to break. And that's why we can then look for shorts with a lot more confidence, because we're trading in line, from strong structure, targeting weak structure, so on and so forth, until we start to come down into those levels where potentially we'd expect that swing high low to form. And then that's where we can, potentially wait for a bullish IBOS, and then we'd expect those ranges to hold until it takes out the weak swing high, right? And that's the framework we're always using. But what happened in this case? Well, again, it broke below, but it failed to close below it. So this is where then we have another sweep, and this is just, to be honest, very typical price action of what you'll not always see, but more often than not you'll see before a high impact news announcement. So again, I didn't really have any interest in trading this. Like I said on the markup, right, there was a bullish chock here, and you potentially could have started looking for longs. But again, it comes down to the higher time frames. We've had a sweep to the downside, sweep to the upside, sweep to the downside again. We're coming off for our supply. We've had the M15 boss. I'm expecting M15 swing pullback. So getting long here, I don't have any confidence trying to buy here. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me to do that. But also not, if anything, I'd prefer the shorts over the longs because of where we're coming off, and because we're expecting that swing pullback, and because we've had, quite a nice aggressive sweep. So probably see something like this, and then maybe look for there. But again, I don't want to short, from that sweep. I don't want to be looking to short against that, because this could be the sweep to fuel liquidity to make the move higher. So when it's so unclear like that, and I can make a kind of a case for both the bullish and bearish scenario, why am I going to get involved, right? I want to try and get involved in the cases where it's a lot more clear and it's a lot more aligned. So yeah, that's it really. I just play it for the M15 because there's nothing that really sparks my interest at this point, and that's why I'm not looking to get short. If anything, if you really wanted it, that would be the high, but now ECB news is coming up. Just let news do its thing, let it play out, let it form new structure. Hopefully we can get some clear intentions and just wait for that, right? You got to be patient and strike when the time is right. Okay, guys, hope you took some value from that as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, guys.